In this video, I'd like to look at Flask, Python-Flask, and then WTF. I'm going to introduce a basic form and use WTF to do that. So going to set up the environment and run. We're adding additional software libraries, so we need a pip install Flask WTF sort of along the way. So I have a virtual environment. I want to move into that virtual environment. I'm going to do that on the command line, just change directory into venv, and then I'm on a Windows machine and I'm calling a PowerShell command that is in the scripts folder. So I'm doing scripts activate, and then I get this little green over here. So my virtual environment is activated. And this is if I did not already, so I'll do it. Copy and paste. This is where I would bring, now I've already done this, but I will do it again. It should just tell me then I've sort of already has it. Okay. So now I have, in addition to, of course, I have Python. My Visual Studio Code knows where Python is. We've added Flask previously, and now we've added Flask WTF. Okay, and right now I have the sort of the Flask part open, the app, but I'm going to put in the more form stuff over another file. And so that's going to be form_intro.py, and I'm going to have a class over there, simple form. And then there are going to be 2 HTML pages in the templates. So still going to be working with templates. One of them is going to be the form where the user can enter something, in this case, just simply a name, something in a text field. And then another page we'll have a different page that will say handles the page. So once we get the information from the user, then we will just sort of spit it back, and that's that. And then we will have those 2 pages will have a shared layout, and they will have a shared style. So simple layout and simple.css. So those are the files in question. We've set up the Flask. So now I want to tell my environment the name of my app. I have a number of apps in my folder. I'm going to use the command line to say I want to work with app_form_intro. So that's the name of my file, except I don't put the py in there. I'm going to allow command line wise some debugging, and these are PowerShell commands that I'm using. And then finally Flask run. Maybe I'll just type that. And this is sort of the Flask does sort of like a web server for me. Here is the URL for the site that is being served. I'm going to control-click, open up the page, and here is my form. It's got a title, it's got a header, there is a form, there is a label, a text input, and a submit button. And I can, a lot of this HTML is done for me, but let's view the page source. And so what's showing up here is just the HTML that was generated, but this is not what is going to be in my simple form.html is not going to be this. But here is the main thing. There was a label, there was an input of the text type, and there was an input of the submit type. Okay, and then we'll enter a name. Fred, it's usually my default name that I use in examples, hit enter, and then over here I have that other page, uh, simple form handler, hello Fred. I did not move to another route, but this is another page. So the page served up for the particular route depends on whether you are before the user has submitted or after, or like if I go back, then this is not a submission, so it will go back to the form page. Okay. So the first thing that happens over here is this is the Flask. This is the sort of controlling the route stuff. But we are going to have a form, the information about the form, I'm going to put in another file called form_intro.py. There it is. And in there, I have a class called simple form. So I'm bringing in, here's the file, here's the class, I'm bringing it over. But 22 are things that, I wrote using Flask, whereas 24 are the things that Flask wrote that I'm going to use. So there's what I wrote and then what the authors of Flask wrote. We're having HTML pages, so that's we're using Flask. We're doing some this URL for comes in when we're getting the style. The render template is when we're using an HTML page in the template folder. Redirect, I'm going to have a default route that gets sent to my simple form, and then there is requests. So this is that form handling. Now, at some stage, when you start to do more sophisticated, form and, you're going to have a form and handle the form and maybe some kind of validation, and you want to know that you'll have multiple pages, and you want to make sure you're coming, from the right place and not sneaking in somewhere in the middle where you shouldn't be, then you might want some of this session stuff set up to have the right kind of security. It's a little overkill for this simple app we have here, but I just sort of like to have it from the beginning and always sort of just keep it there so I'm not, confounded when all of a sudden I need it and it's not there. So I'd rather just sort of have it from the start. So I'm using app.config. There is sort of a default thing called the secret_key, and then I make up something here. And you can have the system generate something random, or if you have something you're going to use, you're better off hiding it in another file. This is just, for me, a silly thing, sort of a bit of a joke involving the Marx Brothers anyway. So, and then that will connect. So while I'm talking about that, let's say that connects to over in the templates, the simple form, there is this CSRF token, and those two things are connected. Okay, but back to here. Okay, so here's my default route, and it's being handled by a function, and that function redirects. So this is just my redirect. That's just some name of some function I made up. There's the redirect that Flask defines, and we're going to the simple form. And here again, I'm using a URL for. So usually I would put here a template. I would use some HTML in the template. Well, no, but anyway, I'm using sending myself to the other route here. And here's my route. I'm calling that route the simple form. There are methods. So it being a form, we are going to have interaction with the data, with the user, and that pass back and forth data. And so there are there are different methods for doing that, where you can sort of narrow it down and do just get or post, but I'm just sort of here putting down both as possibilities. So then here is just the method that handles that. And then here is me using the simple form that I imported up above in 22. So we still have to go and see what that looks like. And then we're asking, again, we looked at the page, there is the form, and then let's change this time to Ginger. And so there's the form and the handler. And so that's what this if is about. And so we're saying that if the form is submitted, we want to get the information from the form, and we're calling it here result, and then go over to the form handler and give it a title and give it a header and send over the result. Otherwise, if we're not coming from a submission, then go to the form and again, a title, a handler, and send over the form. And the form came from simple form. And then it's just some yada yada about debugging, which we've seen before. Okay, so I think next what I owe you is let's go look at simple form, which is in form_intro Python. And this is a very simple form. Again, bring in, announce that we're using flask-wtf, in particular the Flask form, and then what are we using? We're using a string field, what the user types in, that sort of text field that a user types in, and the submit button. So those are both inputs, input of the text type, input of the submit type that when we looked at that form. Here is our class, simple form. It's a Flask form. And we're saying I'm going to have a string field that is going to be labeled with a capital N name. And then what I get out of it, I'm going to call the sort of variable associated with it, if you will, or I'm going to get a dictionary, and I'm going to have a key value pair, and the key is going to be name. And so this says so this here is the label. This string field is announcing that I'm going to have a text input. Name is going to be what we're going to call the label, and then name is the variable or the key value pair within the dictionary. And here's the submit field. Enter is going to be what the button says. And then if we need to refer to it in code in any way, I'm going to call it submit. So that's what the form looks like. And so we saw that's the two Pythons, the Python that does the routes, the Python that defines the form. Now let's look at the simple form and the simple form handler. And they both extend the layout. So we've seen that before. So there is some HTML that is common to both of them. It has a place for me to put in a title, but the data comes in. There's a link to some style sheet, and then there's a place for a header and a place for content. So we were sending over a title, a header, and those are the two things, and then the other stuff we'll just refer to generically as the content. So that's what's in the layout. Over in the form, we use the layout. We say that we're going to send it something called title, and that's what we're going to put in the title container, defined by the layout. Same thing for the header. And then here is our content for this particular page. We're going to have a form. The method is going to be post. So here we're only doing post, whereas over in Python we said get or post, but here we set it up as post. Here's that stuff about the sort of security features and validation. And then here is, I just made a div and put the form dot name dot label. So name is, I'm going to have a text input, but that those words that were in the parentheses, like here, capital N name, that is the label. So form dot name dot label is capital N AME, and that is just put in a div. So that's here, that's that label. Then I have another div and I have form.name. That's going to be the text input, and we're specifying a size. Let's again look at the page source. That was here. So there was this additional size of 30. So how many things can I type into that text input? And then I have the form.submit, the submit button. And we saw that as well. There was the submit button. And behind the scenes, and here's the submit button that the user sees. So that's the simple form. The other HTML is the simple form handler. Again, it extends the simple layout. Put the title that we send it in the title block, put the header in the header block, and here is the content. And I just have some paragraph tag, some hard-coded word hello, and then I send over to this route. Here's the form handler route. I send over something I'm calling result, and result has is like a dictionary, and it has a key value pair with the key name that was all sort of coming from here. Name got passed sort of all around. And so the handler, through the results, knows something called name, whatever the user typed in. And so we're just saying hello name. And then the only thing I haven't shown you at this stage is the style, simple. And we had some body color, background color, the dark slate gray. We see that, and it's shared by both the form and the form handler. The writing, the color, the font color, if you will, was white. It was Arial. There was some padding around things. I gave the form a border so we could see the form, what was and wasn't in the form. And there was some padding and some margin, some spacing, and then the divs I gave also some margin. So just to get me some spacing around here so things weren't sort of too tightly packed. And that's it. So there were a lot of pieces. And this, when you're working with Flask and WTF, a lot of it is keeping track of it. It does a lot of work for you, but you've got to keep track of your pieces and make sure you've put them in the right place. So there was what I'm calling here the app, the Flasky part, just handling the routes. Then there was the form stuff that sort of said, here are the things I'm having on my form. Then the actual HTML over there in the template. So there was how to put the form before the user interacts with it, and then what I call the handler to what do we want to do with that information, and the shared layout and the shared style. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to show you in this one. Thanks for your attention.